It's time to start the show.
And isn't it amazing when Michigan can keep this game to a 19-foot 9-inch game inside that three-point line? It's all theirs. Nice move by Steve Fisher here. Turn it into the 19.
Welcome to the 19-9 podcast. I'm the Chucker, 19-9's resident historian, and today I'm taking another deep dive in Kentucky Wildcat hoops, this time with former Wildcat Aminu Timberlake, and I'm doing this alongside my co-host, Aaron Meyer. A 6'9" forward from Chicago's DeLaSalle High School, Timberlake picked the University of Kentucky and coach Rick Pitino over DePaul, Michigan, and others as a coveted prep recruit out of the Chicago Catholic League in 1991. The only Aminu to ever play Division I hoops, Timberlake joins the 19-9 podcast to share stories of getting recruited by Rick Pitino and other coaching luminaries, playing in the greatest game ever, the Stomp, the Shot, and his enduring memories of 2 years with the Kentucky Wildcats. So Aminu, thanks for joining us here on the 19-9 podcast.
Thanks for having me.
Well, we are geek to talk some UK hoops here, and we get to this time of season where Midnight Madness is going to be kicking in soon. We got some preseason hoops training going on. Does that feel like a different lifetime ago for you, or does that kind of still a part of your kind of calendar engine, so to speak?
Well, right now, more of my calendar is for my girls, right? I have two that play soccer, but one is in college and she plays. And so that's how my calendar goes right now. And so I'm excited to see my daughter at West Georgia this year. This will be her first year playing there. And so, so I'm excited about all of that.
Now, with your daughter, did you teach her to try to throw those Catholic League elbows too?
I tried.
Sharpen those, the slide tackles.
You're right.
Slide
that
tackles.
was there. I bring that up because my girls play soccer, but every now and then I'm like, oh, that other girl needs a little elbow or something.
a hip check or something like that.
So I'm glad you brought that out. That's funny.
Yeah, I don't think, we're two Chicago guys here. Aaron, not a Chicago guy.
I mean, I'm Chicago adjacent. I'm from the region, so I can claim like some kind of Chicago adjacent status.
But it's interesting because I don't think people realize, especially in the Catholic League and the public league too, how physical the game is. I mean, it's almost like Big East basketball in the 80s. I mean, and then I know we would go play in the suburbs, and if we got suburban rep, we were in trouble because they would call the game so much tighter. I know when we were playing our fellow Catholic League schools, and we played in the East Suburban Catholic, but I mean, it was definitely more physical, and they let us get away with a lot more. And I'm sure it was in the Catholic League for you as well.
Absolutely. Those games were a defensive grind. I was looking at them. It's not like the run and gun now, which is a little bit more freer. But then, sometimes the scores were like, I don't know, 30-40 or something, right? And that was a barn burner. That was like, that brought people, standing up at the top of the stairs because there was no room to sit. But those were, those were tough fought battles where after the game you would just spit. And you realize, I left. So there was no doubt you left everything on the floor for sure.
You're hinting at it a little bit, but take us through your basketball origin story. We love hearing like how you got into the game. We see it. Basketball is such a community that connects people throughout their lifetimes. From player to fan, and we're always interested to see how you got into the game initially.
Yep. Well, I'm 48 now. I still play, just a lot of pickup at least twice a week. Really enjoy that. As I tell people, I still have a very competitive spirit. I still talk the most trash, but I also say I just enjoy getting up and down and getting some wind in my hair. But even though it's nothing much there, but as far as my story, I was a late starter, or a late bloomer. That is, I've always been. I'm 6'9" still, but people used to ask me, was I always tall, right? And I used to tell them, well, this is how I put it in perspective. Whenever we took those class pictures, I was always in the back, right? In that back row standing up. So I was always usually the tallest in my class. But I remember my 7th grade year, or the summer going into my 8th grade year, that is, I was running around, the school I was going to didn't have a basketball team, but my stepfather put me in a basketball camp that summer for a couple weeks at Malcolm X College, right? Near the United Center, that area. And so when I went there, it was the main people that were there was another team from Beasley Academic Center, right? That's where Jamie Brandon, Derek Rose, and a lot of others people actually went. And so I was playing around. I enjoyed the game. I kind of picked it up. And I remember that coach telling my stepfather, Thomas Green, that's who it was. He said, "Listen, if this kid is if he has good grades, we'd love to have him because it was a strong academic school. They believed that if he's like he used to tell, if you do well in the classroom, you should do well on the court. If you do well on the court, you should do well in the classroom. So they were about, books. They weren't just about playing, but it was about books as well, which was key. But I ended up transferring that year, and I remember taking the train like an hour one way just to get there. That's when we actually lived up north a little bit, and then I went and Beasley is let's just say, where is it? It's about 52nd and State, somewhere around there.
Wow.
Yeah. And so that was really the beginning of my career, was 8th grade. So it was an amazing beginning, and that was really the catalyst to me even, being able to not just go across state lines, but obviously play overseas a little bit as well, or see the world, right?
Yeah, it opened your eyes up as a young man for sure. That's amazing.
Mm-hmm.
All right, so you came in an era of big time high school hoops in Chicago. Just your class, the class of 1991, and reading this off is pretty amazing. Michael Finley, Jawan Howard, Tom Kleinschmidt, who is on our podcast, Sherelle Ford. When did you start to realize that you could compete with some of those guys? Because it's one level like getting into basketball, but now you've got this this group of guys where you start to, like you said, you start to open your eyes to like, oh my gosh, the world of basketball is a lot bigger than just just my backyard or just my neighborhood.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm. Well, this is the thing is that I always had a competitive nature, or was beginning to be nurtured and developed as I began to play. But I would tell you, as I began to see, I began to see my name a little bit more on the Tribune and sometimes, and then they would rank everybody to see who was who. Then that's where I said, okay, I can compete at this level. And then I wanted to compete at the level, right? I enjoy working through the process and playing in these games. I didn't know much. I look back and said, man, I wish I would have watched more film.
Oh man, I
try
know.
to learn the game more.
Gosh.
But being in those games, and then also just people speaking into you, right?
Right.
I had coaches, like I said, Thomas Green, and then in high school, Jim Tracy and Tony Rappel, as well as teammates that really encouraged me to just to play hard, and good things happen from there.
Yeah, that's amazing. So you were heavily recruited out of DeLaSalle for Kentucky, DePaul, Michigan, Georgetown, Indiana, just to name dropping a few. You're talking John Thompson, Bobby Knight, Rick Pitino. What are some of your memories, or maybe a favorite memory from that time being recruited?
Well, I guess the rule still stands, but you could kind of pick 5 schools that you would like to recruit you, as you kind of narrow things down. So the first memory was, I remember Coach Jim Tracy had I guess a tradition, or a part of the program process about recruiting, was that he would keep all your letters that you would get until the end of your sophomore year. Kind of didn't want you to get distracted or anything, but so I remember one day he just brought me in the office and said, hey, and he pointed at this huge box of letters and said, that's your box, right? You'll get it at the end. But it was just a reminder, hey, there is a bigger picture here that you may not really see. So just make sure you keep your nose clean and keep working, right? But the other thing about that recruitment process and kind of narrowing down those schools, I would say one of the more memorable, well, I had a few stories about home visits, right? So one, John Thompson, he was all of 6'10" or something, if you will, because I remember him coming in the house just ducking through, the doorways. And so I was like, wow, this guy's is phenomenal. It's just a huge presence.
Yep.
And that is one of the schools I grew up really enjoying because they had Patrick Ewing and all these other big men I was supposedly, going to follow in some of those footsteps. But the other was obviously Rick Pitino and the crew driving up in. It was three. I'm gonna say three black Lincoln Town cars.
Yes.
And so that whole crew came
The
and
suits.
sold me the suits and everything. He was totally living up to that, New York state of mind sort
Yes.
of Italian, culture. But then lastly, I think that one of the most memorable was a I want to say encounter between my grandmother, who's now 90,
Oh, that's awesome.
and Bobby Knight.
Oh, yes.
Yeah. So this is the story: is that they came to my home visit. It was him and a couple other coaches, and so my grandmother happened to be there that day, and I was one of the few. I don't even know if if she was at the other ones, but she was at this one, and they gave us a whole spiel and how it would be a right place for me and the school is great. And then they said basically any questions or do you have any doubts or that any reason why your son or Aminu shouldn't go here that we can answer. So all of a sudden my grandmother just spoke up and said, "Wow, I do." And I'm like, "Okay, wow, okay, what's going on here?" So she actually tells a story of when she's watching it, and she's not a real sports person. But she was flipping to the TV one night, and she happened to land on an Indiana game, right? And within 5 minutes of that game, it is the game where he threw the chair
Oh
on the court.
no.
Yeah,
The famous the famous Purdue game.
Man.
yeah. I'm glad you mentioned that. I didn't know who. I forgot who they played, but
Yeah.
he threw the chair on the floor, and that was obviously a huge moment in basketball history, if you will.
Yeah.
But I remember she mentioned it, and she said, "Hey, I saw that incident, and with your basically." Uh, with that sort of behavior and attitude, I don't think I don't think I would enjoy seeing my grandson go there, because so that was one of the more awkward signs because obviously
Oh
Bobby
my
Knight
gosh.
is,
Yeah.
bigger than life in Indiana as well as everywhere else at that time, especially. But it was an awkward silence where they just looked at one another, and he didn't want,
Grandma's spoken.
yeah, but you could tell he was
Yeah, yeah.
very stubborn and
Yeah, yeah.
thinking, "Do I really have to answer this?"
Exactly. I know. Yeah.
But
We got to get
but
into like Gene Katie at Purdue and all this other stuff to
yeah,
explain it
yeah,
beyond
he's
that.
but and then so the assistant coach actually spoke up and said, "Oh no, that was in the past. He's learned from it. He's much better now, as far as his his views, and he's learned to control it, much more patient." Anyway, so he tried to explain it away, and then we just kind of moved on. But to this day, I still don't think he really answered.
Yeah.
He didn't
Yeah.
specifically answer my grandmother.
That's good.
It was the
She must have.
assistant
She
coach.
must have had that look in her eye where he was like, "I don't want anything.
Yeah,
I didn't want
but
anything to do with this."
I know for sure they weren't expecting that
Yeah.
comment.
No.
For
No.
sure.
No
Yeah,
doubt. No doubt.
yeah, yeah.
That's
So,
great. All right, Chuck, are you back? Go for number 5. You're in.
All right. So, Aminu, you signed with Kentucky in the fall of 1990. It's important to note that this is not the pinnacle of Kentucky hoops, right? Like, this is kind of a little bit of a low point for Kentucky. The Wildcats are coming off a 14-14 season. They're still on NCAA probation. So talk about what pulls you to Lexington to begin with.
well, there's a couple things, but one of the things was just a sale that we were going to be a part of the next stage in Kentucky history, right? That they have gone through kind of the worst of the storm, if you will, which was that probation, or some say death penalty, right? And so after that, he was continuing to build this phenomenal future at the school and wanted, players like myself to be a part of it. So that was one of the big sales. The other and final one that I would say My mom can vouch for this, but it was when I did go to Midnight Madness on my visit. So I went there, and I've never seen anything like it. At that time, it was at, what was that, Memorial Coliseum, and not a new Rupp as now. So even
Right.
Memorial at that time, I think sat anywhere from 12 to 15,000, but it was spectacular. And he's a showman through and through, right? And
Hmm.
so him kind of resurrecting that, I think it's always been around, but it was, it was resurrecting that and kind of more of a showmanship, right? But when I saw the love of the fans to the players and the
Mm.
players to the fans, the students especially, I just was amazed, and I thought this is the place for me. And so I remember getting off the airplane, and this was back. People don't remember this, back when the people could actually pick you up at the
Yeah,
gate,
right.
right? Now they can't even go near the luggage.
Uh,
But anyway, so my mom picks me up at the gate, sees me come out. She looks at my face and just like, "You want to go there, don't you?" And I'm
oh,
like, "Yes." And so she's like, "Just wait a day, wait a day, a couple days, let it soak in before you make any commitment." But it was that experience, no doubt, was unlike any I was a part of ever in my life, even today.
And so when you get to you're geeked to go there, man. When you get to Kentucky in the fall in 1991, first kind of introduction to like big hoops and what's that was like. When did you realize like this was something different than anything else you'd experienced previously?
Well, again, like I said, the fanfare. So let me point to a couple different situations. So I remember going there once, for a freshman orientation, right? And they had the different students that they were there, not just athletes. But I remember going through there, and I was in the class, and they asked everybody to kind of introduce, and then let's just say it was about 20 or 30 people. Asked everybody to kind of introduce themselves, where they're from, and kind of what they were there for. And I remember it was my turn. I said who I was, where I was from, and then said I was here and I was playing basketball, and all of a sudden they started clapping. I was like, they're like, "Yeah!" So I was like, "Wow, this is something." This fanfare is big. So that was great. So again, something different, and I still didn't know what that really meant as far as Kentucky basketball. But as far as me getting acclimated, I remember that was tough. I was used to working hard. I wanted to work hard. He claimed, not just claimed, proclaimed, and then backed it up. He wanted to be the hardest working team in America,
mm.
and I think, bar none, those practices were one of the hardest ones in America. And so, but I do remember playing and being in a situation where things weren't clicking right away.
Yeah.
Right. So I'm looking around and I'm thinking, man, what is going on? And this is kind of what I tell kids today that's moving to that next level. I'm like, what's going on? Because I used to be the best, where I was from, the best on my team. Why am I not kind of the best here or shining?
Mm.
But then I looked around and it was reality. I said, well, everybody here was the best
Yeah.
where they were.
Yeah.
Everybody was the
The
best.
best,
So,
the best
uh,
ever too, probably
yeah,
from where they were.
yeah,
Yeah.
and soon to be the best ever. And
Yeah.
little do I know, even have their numbers retired
Yep.
in the rafters. So those were some of the memories that I had, and as far as the transition goes, some of the highlights, lowlights, but some of the kind of the reality, kind of smacking you in the face, if you will.
Well, piggyback off that because you start 9 games as a freshman, and it's a good season for the Cats, 29-7, regular, got the regular season SEC title, tournament title. But I'm always like caution people because now freshmen play a lot. That's pretty regular. But I just kind of want to get your perspective on what it was like to step into that starting role or have expectations as a freshman. And then, what it means to see some of these guys today, Amani Bates or whoever stepping in as, reclassified freshmen and trying to compete at that level. Cause there is such a
Yeah.
big jump, even for the best guys.
Yeah, it's a whole different game. I mean, obviously there's still transition, right? But these guys have dedicated themselves to the game and see a future in it way before. Like, we're just playing to get a scholarship, if that. right? With a small picture of NBA in our heads where these guys are in eighth grade
Mm-hmm.
being told this and dedicating themselves to it. So it was a different era. So to see a freshman play, yeah, then I guess it was rare. Did I understand what that really was back when I was there? No, I was a young kid. I just wanted to play,
Yeah.
and
Yep.
knew my role. It was funny. I was just talking to my wife because we were watching some of the Kentucky kind of pro day,
Oh yeah.
right? And then it was a kid on there who was like 6'9", and he was like 225. That's at that time. That's what I would have liked to have been, right? But I was like 6'9", 205. What's that? I was strong. I was
Yeah.
strong. Could play defense in the post and do it and run. But for the most part, yeah, to be a freshman at that age, I really couldn't grasp what that really meant. I just knew I was playing, and I was trying to enjoy myself and please the coach and just just add help get a win. So
Yeah. I love that. Well, let's go back to the 91-92 team. You're on led by the unforgettables, John Pelfrey, Sean Woods, Duron Feldhaus. These four seniors remain committed despite those sanctions. I just kind of wanted to get like the vibe of that team. Like, what was it like coming in with those guys or knowing those guys?
well, no, because they were truly humble, right? And again, when you're that age, I really don't think you could fathom or quite grasp what is actually taking place,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And so what I noticed was these guys were leaders. They helped out as much as they can, and they also knew there were guys coming in there like Jamal Mashburn and other later,
Right.
Roger Groves, the Tony Delks, the Walter McCartys. These guys were all Americans coming into the game and about to change the face of it, but they worked hard and they led always through their examples.
Mm-hmm.
They'd dive in the stands if they had to. Bust through a wall, and that was a sort of leadership that I look back that I think was key to our success.
I love hearing that. Just the using the word humble. It can be there is something lost. I feel like sometimes when you have those older guys on the team that are still contributing in that way because and that mismatch of talent. I think still you often see some of the best teams have that one holdover guy who's able to kind of come together. I think that still is an element of success in college hoops. You saw it with Gonzaga and Baylor last year. Certainly they had some more seasoned guys. It's tough with the all freshmen or a really young team not to have that kind of develop that mentality, I guess.
Right. I think those teams create a lot of more parity in the game as well
Mm.
because, and then because you have these guys that have stayed,
Mm-hmm.
they're more mature mentally as well as physically, and they're like I said, humbled, and they just want to work hard and play for the university. Um, and again, back in their mind, maybe it's aspirations to play, continue to play, but overall, they are truly focused on the here and now, and that's to win the game. And I think that gives them a true advantage when it comes to younger teams, right? Talent might squeeze its way out with a W, but most times you're saying, they're up against a real fight. Look at where Pitino is now,
Yeah.
Iona, or you can name just a number of these teams that have holdovers of people that have gone. Loyola, look at Loyola
Yeah. No
at the
kidding.
time.
Yeah.
They were destroying people and nobody ever knew them, but they were, kids that work well together, hard together, and been working that way for years. And that was their true advantage.
This is a branch off of that, but how did you develop? We were talking to Charlie Miller, and he was talking a little bit about how he develops the off the court mentality for kids because he felt like that was something that he could have used as a young player. And I just wanted to see what your approach to the rest of the life around, because basketball is such a small part. I mean, you're not pros when you're playing college basketball, so. How did you balance the rest of that? Because it's such a there's such big expectations, not just on the court but off the court when you're a student athlete.
Right. So that's a good question. Really depends on. I don't have a cookie cutter answer
Yeah,
because it really depends on the athletes that I'm speaking with, right?
sure.
So
What
the
about
high
for
school.
your daughters? Like, or what would you tell them?
Well, they seem to be navigating a lot better than I did in a sense, which is what I instilled to them.
Yeah, yeah.
It was have good study habits. I didn't at the time. I
Yeah.
really didn't have good study habits. I think in high school, I didn't have to study as much. I think I got it, and not bragging on myself
Yeah,
saying,
yeah.
"Oh, I was smart," but that hurt me
Right.
when I went to college alone. And the study habits are key. So my girls learned to figure that out early, and so they've had great grades throughout their high school career. And my oldest, throughout her college career, she was all conference, all academic, one season, and she just continued to. But I'm learning a lesson from her as well. She made a goal um, beginning of her freshman year that she wanted a all-around experience, right?
Mm.
College experience,
Yeah.
not just in athletics. And so she began to do that slowly, but she's participated in so many things. And if people go look her up, Maya Timberlake, so she did some unity walks.
Mm.
She's a part of the athletic scholar athlete or something, leadership council.
That's awesome.
Just recently she was voted to be a part of the homecoming court,
Mm.
right? Which I'm going to be walking her in a couple weeks onto
Congrats.
the field, so that's great.
Yeah.
She also has her eye on some other things at the school to help her develop as a person overall, right?
Yeah.
Because I think that's what it's about. Yes, you can focus on the skill set of just playing
Mm.
basketball, but there are other things that would, if you would help you to become better, not just at that,
Yeah.
but then also how that help you translate off the court,
Yeah.
right? In other settings that I think people they miss out on or lose.
I think that's great.
So much,
Yeah.
I mean, we talk about like sports being such a great learning ground for life and things like that. And so we kind of like dig further into your basketball history. Let's get into the NCAA tournament and let's fast forward your freshman year to what some consider the greatest basketball game ever played. And that's the East Regional Final, Kentucky in Philadelphia. You are, of course, known for one of the most famous or maybe infamous in that game, and that's often called the Stomp. So take us back to the Philadelphia Spectrum on March 28th, 1992, and give us your side of the loving Christian Leitner, if you would.
Okay. Well, I tell you this. I can barely remember what I did 2 weeks ago. So when you talk 92. Now, I tell you this is one fact too, and I know I'm not the only one, but I've never watched that whole game since I play. I've never. It's always
You're missing
on.
out, man.
Yeah.
I know, but I know how it ends. So
That's the
a
tough part,
spoiler
right?
alert.
Yeah.
But I watched a little and I said, man, I look good. I was a physical specimen back then. But then I was thinking, why didn't I just dribble the ball? Go take it. Like, what are you doing?
Yeah.
Just silly things that I look at now and I'm like, man. But I was just proud to be there and a part of that whole history. But back then, again, a situation where um, I I didn't really have, well, I think it's key. One of the things we talked about helping kids transition, have mentors, right?
Mhm.
Have people that kind of have been there or somewhere around them that can kind of give you hints of what's next. And then also what to truly appreciate. Because at that age, I'm not really I'm wanting to run up and down and do these things, but to soak in the moment,
Mm.
Coach Pitino tried to help us to do that. But again, we're just not fully
Yeah.
developed. That's
Yeah.
not especially boys. And so I remember seeing Dr. J, Dr. J, because he was around at that time, just hanging out,
That's cool.
seeing other people. I don't know. No, I don't think Barkley was there, but
Oh, name
uh,
dropping.
Yeah.
well, I don't think he was there, but
Yeah.
I just remember seeing some of these people that were there and, legends of the game. But then also occasionally, again, Kentucky people and meeting those people and just the fanfare and having that support. And so that was a lot of what I also remember. This crowd, this fanfare, people going crazy. As far as the Leitner thing, it was just a hard fought battle where all I could do is just, a lot of it was just pushing and shoving and it's just trying to get some rebounds and so forth.
Wishing you were
And
225.
yes, exactly. And back then, I didn't really think about it, but man, we had an eating regimen.
Yeah, right.
That's a whole nother story. But I would tell you this: I was very strong.
Yeah. Wiry strong.
So,
KG strong. KG strong.
And I had some Christian brother, a Catholic League elbow.
That's right. That's right.
That helped. But in those games, it was just a fierce battle. Once again, and again, there was no way I'm thinking, oh, this is the greatest game ever. I was just thinking, how can we win this game?
Yeah.
How can my defensive effort really aid? How can I get the ball to Jamal Mashburn? That sort of stuff. And then we just go back and forth, and it was just one of those things where I would tell you also in our mind, especially mine, I thought whoever wins this game, I thought when we win this game, we're going to win the whole thing.
Yeah.
That's just how it was. And that was a change in mindset when you're talking about, going from actually being on probation to actually changing, going into the new era, if you will, or legacy. Rick Pitino and the Big Blue Nation as well, University of Kentucky.
Okay, real talk. If you had the name, image, likeness, how many of those "I Hate Christian Laettner" shirts could you have sold?
Oh man, that's crazy. So I was thinking about what's his name, Bosworth. Remember, he had some sort of 30.
Oh yeah.
Right? So I thought about this. I would have 2 sets of T-shirts.
Yeah.
I would have I love Laettner.
Yeah,
I
there
sell
you go.
that, and then I have I hate Laettner and make money on both ends.
Both ends. I love it. Why cut out half of the fans?
Right.
I love it.
Because I remember Bosworth did something like that.
Yeah.
I was like, yeah, that's genius.
That's perfect. Yeah.
Yeah.
All right, so Laettner's foot is only one piece of the drama in that game. It's kind of back and forth. We were talking about Mashburn scoring a bunch in there. It goes into OT. Sean Woods banks into that crazy shot. Looks like you guys are going to pull off the upset. Go back to those closing moments from Woods' shot to the subsequent huddle. Kind of what was Coach saying, or just anything. Maybe even it's hard, maybe specifics, but maybe like the sense of the moment. Then like that right before that last shot.
Yeah, I think Coach Pitino, if I remember correctly, he was very skilled at his job, right? And doing it, he always kind of had an answer. If not, he had a crew behind him that would really kind of help guide us and so forth. So he always had an answer in these huddles and what to do and kind of keeping our composure and going back and forth, right? So that was key. And that kind of galvanized us so that we always had a mind that we were competing always, and that it was not just to be there, but to compete to win. And that if we competed at a high level, we'd always have a chance to win. And thinking about those guys, again, not big names maybe at the time, except for Mashburn.
Yeah.
It was just one of those things where you had these guys just come together, fight as hard as can, win a lot of big games, and continue that run. And I still think, again, today, if we would have won that game, we would have won everything. But as far as the back and forth, I just remember it being like breathtakers every time. It's like, it's just all these emotions, going through as we kind of continue to watch the back and forth, trying to figure out how this game was going to end.
Yeah, I think the speed, something I obviously never got to play on that level, but the games seem to like speed up almost. It's hard to like slow your mind down when so much is happening at once, and to be on that level must have been pretty amazing.
Yeah, and it's true about that speed of the game. That's another transition people have to go through. I went through, because I remember being, I think it was one time, we were playing like Georgia Tech, and I remember, we had set screens and we're doing all this other stuff. But I remember one day I was out there and I felt like I was in slow motion, right? Usually when the game is good, everybody else is in slow motion.
Yeah.
But I remember it was like, what in this game, this speed, and that's when they had like Mackey, they had all these giants and so forth. But I remember, so sort of to that point, the game was fast, as far as the Duke game goes. But the back and forth, it was just, it was amazing to watch. And again, some of this is hindsight when you have people constantly telling you greatest
Yeah,
game
right,
ever,
right.
right? And so to be a part of that, I just was very grateful
Yeah.
and still amazed, at some of how people remember them watching it and where they were and still being a part of that whole legacy.
Yeah, that's awesome. So you said you prefer to not remember the game as the stomp or the shot, but Coach Pitino's post-game speech to the team. So bring us back to that and why that's the element of that game that sticks with you all these
hmm
years later.
hmm So again, he was prepared, right? Because and I guess you obviously could have gone both ways, but I remember
Mm-hmm.
he had a old Sports Illustrated where I forget what it said on the front, something like "disgraced" or something. But it showed like when Kentucky was at its lowest point, they were on probation, and so and they were made that cover of Sports Illustrated. Well, either way, he was still showing us. Obviously, he meant for us to win, but he showed us and said, "Listen, there's nothing that really hang your head. This was a tough loss,
Mm-hmm.
obviously, especially for the seniors. For me at the time, I thought we're going to be here next year, and then we're going to get them.
Always, right?
But you look at the seniors that were there and all that they did, and like you said, they stayed when everybody left. And so to be in that game, to be at that level, one step away from being in the Final Four, was something that I don't even think they could have dreamed ahead at. Right? Even
Yeah.
if they were being told that, they were like, "Hey, we started. It was just us, and we were running up and down, playing in games that didn't count.
Yeah, right.
And shooting and having a new coach and running ourselves to repute. But now it's like." Okay, this was these guys were poured out. They shed tears. They were
Yeah.
upset and they gave all they had. But it was still one of those speeches where he said, "Hey, you made um, the university, the whole state of Kentucky,
Yeah,
and
right.
everybody that followed proud."
That's awesome.
Yeah.
You said run till you puke. Is that do you feel like that brought the team together? Because I often wonder about that now because I feel like that's a different approach, something that's really changed in the game. Because I remember doing that with my coaches, and now I don't think they do that anymore. And I wonder
Well,
sometimes, did that like galvanize you guys a little bit? Like
yeah.
boot camp
Well, even if
almost.
it's metaphor, I mean, yeah, people did run into the puke, but
Yeah.
just being in the trenches with these guys,
Okay.
right? Sweat, blood, and tears,
Yeah.
right? It's like waking up. I remember doing 5 at 5.
Yeah.
Waking up doing 5 miles at 5 a.m. in the morning,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
I remember one New Year's Eve toasting water because we're practicing that late, toasting water into the new year. I remember running on the track and trying to get a mile run, for time. I remember sitting at tables trying to gain weight with one of my teammates, Andre Riddick, and so
Yeah.
and trying to stuff ourselves, and then he couldn't hold it anymore, and then he just puked all over the place. But anyway,
Oh my
but
gosh.
these were events, these were experiences that if I haven't seen guys for like 10 years or so, whenever we get together, it's a true brotherhood,
Hmm,
and those were experiences that
that's cool.
brought us together. Yep.
Um, okay, up on the stories tab on 19.9, the Chucker has a short piece detailing that loss to Kentucky, which seemed to galvanize the program and set up that 92-93 team for success. He acknowledges that that's his interpretation, but he's got his question in here since he's having some internet trouble is, did that loss shape the program or sharpen the program? What's your perspective on that?
Um, that was a result of Coach Pitino and his coaching staff, the work that not just the coaching staff to help direct the whole program, right? And the work that they put in with the players, but that happened way before that game, right? The work, the extreme work that was put in, well, that game couldn't have happened,
Mm,
and the success after that couldn't have happened without the work that everyone put in previous, right?
yeah.
And so I would even point all the way back to when they did go on probation, and the Untouchables
Mm.
or actually, um, you know, stayed there and played. I remember like Reggie Hansen.
Yeah.
I talked to him not too long ago. But these guys, the work that they put in allowed the continued shaping of the program in a new way, but continued to a legacy and a culture of winning,
Mm.
right? And so even when you looked around the room and there was no real big names except, like I said, Mashburn, people believed in one another and the direction
Mm.
of the program, that you were destined, right, to have big wins, not just now but moving forward.
Mm. Do you and Mashburn ever argue New York versus Chicago?
I'm sure I don't remember, but I'm sure those conversations came up
Yeah.
every now and then. I know a lot of them was coming up about rappers,
Yeah, I
who was the
bet.
best or
Yeah, I
whatever.
bet.
But they had that at
Yeah,
the
yeah,
time.
yeah.
So
Yeah, early 90s,
yeah.
that's yeah.
Yeah, but then also you're right. Oftentimes they come up with New York. From New York was
Right?
in the NBA, and then who from Chicago was
Yeah.
in the NBA. So
Always
yeah,
a
those
fun debate.
conversations came up. Yeah.
That 1992-93 season ends in the Final Four at the hands of Michigan. As you reflect on that season, what key moments remain with you?
Well, for me, um, I still had I have a Final Four ring, so that was good.
Yeah.
And for a while, I was, a little hesitant to kind of wear it because it for me it wasn't the best of years, right?
Mm.
Personally, it's a good year for the team, which I was happy about. But I was kind of, I was a tweener, so a lot of times I didn't play as much. They brought in likes of Rodney Dent, which I love him. But these were true centers and big guys, right? I'm 6'9", playing the role of the center, but again at 210, 215,
Yeah.
when these guys are like 265, 280, not
Yeah.
easily. So I didn't play as much, and so I still fought hard. Still was a part of the Kentucky family and the team and everything. But that was a tough year for me, where basketball was kind of let me down a little bit, right? So this is personally.
Yeah.
Um, as far as the team goes, I still celebrate that, wear the ring on occasion, because then also the mature, Timberlake realized not a lot of people have those rings, right? Um, Now you win, a well, nothing against bad men, but you can win a state champion high school conference, and they give you these big rings,
Yeah, right?
But but back then those rings really meant something, because again, not everybody has those.
It's like the patches on that Letterman jacket back in the day.
Exactly,
Yeah.
exactly. So, which I can show you guys again.
he's still
Because
he's still
I'm
breaking he's
proud of
still
this.
breaking it
Yeah, I'm
out.
proud of this. So,
I love it.
um, but overall, yeah, but overall, I could just think about the friendships and so forth that were built there were second to none.
You transfer after that season to Southern Illinois. What went into that decision?
Yeah. So, again, I didn't have anybody to kind of help walk me through it, so that was a challenge, and that's why when I talk to kids and that I see these kind of opportunities to share the triumphs as well as the struggles to help prepare them for those next levels of transition. Um, Anywhere from just making sure you keep your, well, I would say it's about the DMs, as people say now, right? It's not the DMs that people think about now, direct messaging, but it's
Mm-hmm.
about diplomas and it's about memories, right? And really holding on to those things and keeping focus on those things. But you know, as far as for me and my transition, it was kind of tough. I
Mm.
mean, I was a big name, and I came in, and quite frankly, I didn't have a stronger career. But I think overall, I found my wife of 25 years
Mm.
to school.
That's
I
something.
became a, yep. I became some days. No, no, I became a Christian, and that was a battle in itself
Mm,
because at some point in time, basketball was my God, but then realized that is falls short,
mm,
of the true God, and yeah, and so I gave my life to Christ and was baptized, and went on mission trips to South Africa, Zimbabwe, and South Africa and New Zealand, began to see the world in a different manner, also combined with sports. And just when I was going to hang my shoes up, I had opportunities to go overseas and play, right?
mm.
And so that love of the game and that also embracing the love of Christ, I think put me on a whole nother trajectory of, again, appreciation for the road that I travel, its hardships, but also its victories.
So when you're looking back at the season at Kentucky, what was how do you think? I guess what's your overall like thought of it or impression? What's your sense of it? Is it the relationships you've hit on that a few times, or is there something else like the opportunity to grow, or what's the one thing basketball wise that you kind of reflect on all these years later?
Um, let's see. I went back and forth a little bit, because I was challenged because you always want to be very successful, right? I wanted my name in the
Yeah.
rafters, but that didn't happen. That's okay. I'm still alive, have great family, and doing things. But as I look back, I just look and say that was a great experience, right? And I'm oftentimes reminded of that simply through the wonderful people, Big Blue Nation, and all that they represent, right? And
Hmm.
sometimes like crazy, obsessed, but mostly just the love for the game and the culture.
Yeah.
So I'll tell one story that I had a few years back. The Tournament of Champions was in Atlanta. I actually had a chance to go, and that's when I first, someone got me. I was invited, so somebody they had some really good tickets, and they brought me a present, which was I still hate late night shirt. So I remember I wasn't gonna wear it at first. I said, "Yeah, that's not really me,"
Yeah, yeah,
going
yeah,
into it. But they're like, "No, you have to wear it." And I'm
yeah.
like, "Okay." So I wear it. I go. And matter of fact, I was still in business as corporate leadership and everything. So I remember I had a nice sport jacket too, and I had this shirt
Yeah,
underneath it.
right.
And so I wear it, but I realized, people started recognizing me a little bit. And I had that shirt on, and that drew a little bit more attention. And so I remember sitting and watching the game, and somebody tapping me on the shoulder, and I was like, "Hey, what's going on?" They said, "Hey, can I take a picture with you?"
Yeah.
And I said, "Oh, great. Yeah, that's fine. Let's take a picture." So I take a picture. Someone else kind of steps in. "Hey, Aminu, that you're here. You do look great. Take a picture." And next thing you know, it's three or four of them, right? And I'm like, "Yeah, this is fun." But I'm enjoying it
Yeah, yeah.
because, I'm kind of hiding out doing my thing and not thinking I'm not really that big or
Right.
they've forgotten about me. But again, this is how I'm thinking about the whole experience, and I think this kind of sums it up in this interaction. And so what I realized, I'm taking a few pictures, and then next thing you know, I look back and there's a line of like 20 people waiting to take a picture with me, right? And so I think that love, that Big Blue Nation love for its players and them wanting to be share in that, that whole overall experience with the players, I think is second to none and something where I truly appreciate more today than I believe when I was a freshman,
That's
right,
awesome.
and in college.
Before we get out of here, Aminu, let's close out the show with some run and gun questions. First up, the coolest arena you played in is?
Um, let's see. Besides DeLaSalle, uh, no air
Letterman jacket. One
conditioning,
more
just a
time.
bunch
Letterman
of.
jacket. One more time.
I no, I would say it's still rough,
Yeah.
hands down. I mean that played and I played in the older rough, but just to see 25,000, that was basically unheard of,
Yeah.
right? As far as college goes, and it was floor to ceiling full of people and energy and just fantastic support.
The wildest opposing fans were?
Um, the one that I remember the most, but it happened to be football. So I remember going to it was it well, shout out to the Wildcats, the football team, 6-0.
Yeah.
They're doing great. When
Not
I
like
went there,
IU.
they didn't start out
Yeah.
6-0. But I remember the University of Georgia came in town. This is when they had Garrison Hurst.
Oh
But I
yeah.
remember we were tailgating, and this car looks like a pirate ship, and it was UGA fans, and they were like, "Hey!" Pointing at us. We know it. This is not. This is our season. This is football season, not basketball.
Oh
And
my
we're coming to get you. But I remember them just yelling at us. We were like, "What in the world is going on?" But UGA football, they obviously. I remember Garrison Hurst. He was sick that game too, and he still ran for almost 300 yards, and
my
he was throwing
gosh.
up in between plays. But it was true. They won that game. So what they said. Oh,
Yeah.
absolutely. So.
The most impressive opponent you ever played against was?
It's funny. I just saw a picture of this, but it was Allen Houston at the time. Shaq was around, but I don't know. Just Allen Houston was just one of the smoothest players who kind of dominated the game. Not a lot of fanfare. I didn't see him talk a lot of trash or make a lot of gestures, but he just dominated the game from beginning to end. And the players that kind of went off, obviously he had a good pro career as well. But I think some people forget his time at Tennessee, which he was very dominant.
Cool. Yeah. So let's one word you would use to describe Big Blue Nation.
That would be hard, but I think I would say unmatched, right? And then you could put anything after that. Unmatched enthusiasm, unmatched love, unmatched history, and again, tradition. So, but I would say unmatched, and again, you could put anything afterward. But that group is amazing.
That's great.
All right. And you talked to us a few things about Coach Pitino here. You talked to us about, him rolling up in his recruiting trip with a little bit of an entourage. You talked about the great speech after the Duke loss.
Mm-hmm.
What's just, besides those things, maybe just one other thing you haven't shared with us here, that one thing you'll just never forget about Coach Pitino and your experience with him there at Kentucky?
Mm-hmm. I think he really understood about the game at that time, especially about bringing in these kids, especially from the city. He understood where they came from, who they were, and he wanted to instill some things that were outside the court, right? And obviously, I think he knew as a connection that how you build character on the court from work ethics and other skill sets that would transfer off the court. But I remember we had etiquette class. Not for a grade, but it was but it was to help us develop, because he knew that we would be in different situations that we weren't used to. So to know, this fork here is used for this, or this glass is here for that, he knew that these kids from the city with somewhat, sometimes poor backgrounds wouldn't, wasn't exposed to this. So this was time to teach us, right? So we went to nicer restaurants and so forth, and he gave us these experiences to help develop us overall. So I thought he was great at the college level. I knew he came from the pros, but I just thought he was better at the college level because he understood these kids and kind of the responsibility of being their coach and kind of their mentor, and kind of putting them in a better situation for the next stage in life.
That's great.
All right. Well, hey, man, we're going to end it there, Aminu, and appreciate joining us here on the 19.9 podcast and talking a little about your basketball journey and Wildcat hoops, man. I think it's a fun journey, and I hope you like to go down memory lane with us, and we appreciate it.
Yep, and I do, and again, I say thank you, gentlemen. These shorts represent.
Oh yeah.
1990s. These things are great, man. And like I said,
man.
I got to find some new shoes, but these take me back because these were the same shorts or the style
Yeah.
that we wore in 91.
Yeah, you got to get to a game where get that I hate Christian Laettner shirt with those shorts on. You'll be taking pictures all day long.
More pictures. You got to get some more white shoes.
That's right. Yeah, right shoes. Or I love Christian Laettner too. You can switch depending on the person. You know.
Yeah, I'm gonna sell both.
All right, man.
Well, thanks here, Aminu, man. We appreciate the time.
Yep.
So thanks, of course, to former Kentucky Wildcat Aminu Timberlake for sharing his time discussing UK basketball. And thanks to you, our listeners, for tuning in. Visit 199.com for some of the flyest college basketball gear around. And subscribe to our podcast for more shows celebrating basketball history and culture. On behalf of the crew here at 199 and my co-host, Aaron Meyer, this is The Chucker, signing off.
Thank you for listening to the 199 podcast. If you haven't already subscribed to the podcast, make sure you do. And while you're at it, leave us a rating or review. 5 stars only, like the basketball camp. We also have links to all of 199 social media so you never miss a release. Until next time,